Okay, so a question came up on the Living Ayurveda course forum that I thought would be just great to answer for yoga health coaches and Living Ayurveda course members and Body Thrive members and podcast listeners. So the question is what to do for an overweight Vata. So the question really came up that there's a lot of people that are overweight these days. Really, the majority of the adult and child population is quite overweight. And so it's a little harder to tell constitution, right? In the past, if you look at photos like 100 years ago, it was much easier to tell a true kapha from a true vata. And now it's hard because when you add 20, 30 pounds of ama or undigested food that are stored as gunk or goo in the system, as you add a lot of excess weight and poor quality tissue, it's hard to tell what's underneath it all. And so often in Ayurveda school, they'll tell you, teachers and gurus and professors will say, don't even try to figure out the constitution until you've detoxed the person, right? Until you can see what's underneath all that gunk and gook, until you can peel back some of the layers and see what is residing underneath. And the process of detoxification is really a process of igniting the agnis, of igniting the cellular fires. And so if we apply this to the Body Thrive habits of just getting someone to eat an earlier, later dinner, of getting someone to get to bed a little earlier, getting them up and at 'em in the morning and moving and breathing and eliminating, right? Just getting them in sync, getting them eating during daylight hours and getting them moving intermittently throughout the day. Right, just those basic habits, without even looking at like specific diets and all that, just those basic habits start to ignite the cellular agnis. They start to allow the body fire, so that the main digestive fire, but then also the fire that's in the lymph tissue, the fire that's in the red blood cell tissue, the fire that's in the muscle tissue, the fire that's in the fat tissue, the fire that's in the deeper levels will come over time with these better habits, right? Over time with just stretching out the time between supper, which is a supplemental meal, and breakfast, which is breaking a fast. The fast minimum should be 13 hours. If someone wants to detox more quickly, that fast can be bumped up all the way towards 18 hours, right? So that there's a much shorter feed time. That would be a 6-hour feed time on the more severe range or the more fast detox range. So it really depends on the level of studentship or the level of adhikara of the person that you're working with, or if I'm speaking to you as the person who wants to get healthier and who wants to lose some of the excess weight, then for you, like, what's your speed? Is it you want to do this quick or you want to do this slow? And pace, it really doesn't matter. What matters is that you're constantly moving into deeper alignment with who you want to be. That is a much better determinant of how you'll be in 6 months or a year. And we're really looking towards long-term thrive as opposed to like fitting into your favorite jeans in a month sort of thing. Okay, so back to the question of how can you tell if under this extra 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds, and it's interesting because I've helped people lose up to 80 pounds, so now I'm a little bit more familiar. It's like, how can you tell what's underneath it all? And are there some signs to get to know? And yes, there are. And anyone particularly in Living Ayurveda course, knows a lot of these signs. They know to look for the gunas. They know to look for, is the person more dry or are they more oily? Are they more hot or are they more cold? Are they more, quick thinking or are they more slow thinking? Are they more outer or are they more inner in their personality? Like, what are their core emotions? Now, emotions get a little tricky because emotions can be toxic emotions and they might be a side effect more than an underlying essential nature. And so these are some of the things that make it a little bit confusing. So let's talk about an overweight Vata person. If someone's overweight in their Vata, they still will probably have some underlying tendencies towards irregularity. And this is one of the main differences between like a kapha overweight person and a Vata overweight person. The kapha overweight person will have a lot of tendencies towards, if you will, hyper-regularity. Their routines, their rhythms are the same day in and day out, that they don't like change very much, or they're not naturally brought into change, like they're not changing their meal times, they're not changing their schedule, they're not changing their lifestyle that much, but things are more or less the steady pattern day in and day out. And for a kapha overweight person, usually if they're overweight, that just means they're eating too much and they're eating too late. Those are usually the things. And they're not exercising enough. They're not moving enough. Kaphas need to physically move quite a bit more than the other constitutions. I have a very kaphic body, so I know this inside out. I need to move a lot. And when I don't, the pounds just stick to my hips and my butt and my belly and really everywhere. Kaphas will gain weight evenly and Vatas won't. Like a kapha can carry an extra 40 pounds and not even seem that much overweight. Me and my body, I can carry about an extra 15 to 20 pounds and not really look fat. I just look a little stocky, stocky is really the word, just stocky, right? Because kaphas will gain weight evenly. Vatas won't. Like Vatas will gain it like all in the belly or in the chest belly or all in the thighs, butt. Have you ever seen that person really thin up top, right? Like the from like the chest up looks entirely different from the diaphragm down. Right? Diaphragm up is like a Vata constitution. Diaphragm down is like a kapha constitution. That's a sign usually that Vata is very involved because you're seeing irregularity. You're seeing two really different stories going on. And I'm not going to get deep into the details of what's going on there, but it's just something to start to look for. The apple figure, someone who's carrying all the weight more in the middle, that can very much be more of a Vata type. Like I said, kaphas, you're going to see more of this evenness. You're going to see steadiness of rhythm. And with Vata, you're going to see a lot of irregularity. You're going to see them eating at different times a day. You're going to see a lot of stress, right? Instead of a lot of complacency, kaphas will have the complacency. They're like, I could lose the weight, but it doesn't really bother me that much. Vatas, you usually don't see that. You usually see a lot of frustration. You usually see the weight of the world is on their shoulders because they really don't have the frame to hold the weight that they're carrying. And that's really one of the biggest things to look for. If it's a Vata that's really heavy, you've got to understand like they are carrying way more weight than their frame is designed. They can't really get away with much. And so it will feel it'll feel very they'll feel disembodied. They'll feel very disconnected from their body. They might feel a sense of not being in their body. So Vata is high in ether element and air element. And ether element gives us a very spacious, spacey quality. So they're literally, they can be like spaced out of their body. Like their awareness is hanging out in the cerebral, cognitive, or relational planes, or even in like the deeply intuitive planes. You can see this often with like psychics that are like really out there accessing planes of knowing that the rest of us simply don't have access to, right? But they're not in their body. And so they're not as attendant to their body's needs. And this is very much usually where Vata is in. It's one of the patterns where Vata is involved. The other is the Vata that's like running around, really high in air elements. So they're very scattered. They're here, they're there, they're everywhere. They forget this, they forget that. They're constantly in a state of like just too much. It's too busy. It's too overwhelming. And I don't know where my keys are. And when that happens, the weight might stick on just to help ground the person. Like the physical body or the Annamaya Kosha is saying like, okay, because the mind won't calm down, we'll just bring heaviness. We'll just bring a weightiness in. The body's always seeking some of the opposite qualities of the mind, right? So the body's just thinking like, okay, if I can ground this mind, maybe this person will slow down. That often doesn't happen, right? Because then the Vata type that's like this high air element, they'll think like, oh, I've got to get this weight off. I got to go to the gym. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And they end up putting more and more and more on their plate. So let's talk next about how we might want to pacify an overweight. How does an overweight Vata, how do they find balance? So, or how do they, find balance is such a weird term. How do they seek harmony? What are the easiest steps they can take to experience more of a physical integration where they're in their body, they're grounded in their body, and their body starts to let go of some of this more external poor quality grounding? How do they regulate their digestive fire so that they easily can digest their food? One thing I didn't mention before is that Vata overweight people will have a lot of digestive issues that are more linked to bloating, to IBS, to just issues of like they eat and it gets stuck and they don't feel so good. Pittas will go more towards heartburn and hyperacidity. We'll do a little separate video on that one. And Kaphas, they generally don't have that much digestive discomfort. And so they overeat and they're like, they just get kind of like sleepy and they go to sleep. And that's that. But the Vata person will have a hard time digesting food. And this is part of why their body might be putting on weight, is through poor absorption. Okay, so for the Vata that has more ether element, right? They're really spacey, they're not so in their body. Some basic habits that'll start to help right away. One is self-massage, where they're using their hands on their own skin. They're rubbing oil into their skin. It can be a daily practice. I do it with dry hands, dry loofah gloves in the morning. The ones I have are synthetic. You can try to find them in silk, or you can get the synthetic ones for about $7 on Amazon in any color of your choice. And you just start the morning with putting the gloves on and giving yourself a quick massage. Now, some practitioners will be listening and they'll be saying, well, why would you use dry gloves with someone that has a lot of ether? That's something that's already naturally a little bit more dry and light. And the reason I do is because it's fast, easy, and it's first thing. So it's like the first thing of just like get the person in their body. You don't even have to use gloves. You can just use your hands and just give yourself a good once over massage, so that the first thing in the morning after you pee, you're getting your awareness into your skin. You're feeling your musculature, you're feeling your bones, you're feeling the size and shape of your body, you're feeling what's here, what's there, what's everywhere. And you're starting to notice, but you're also, this is the cool thing about self-massage, you're also increasing your agnis. You're also turning up those digestive fires, both the digestive fire in your gut, but also the fires that are more in those different levels of tissue. The fire that's in your lymph system in particular gets turned on when you do that self-massage, right? You're moving your blood. So the fire in the red blood cells gets fired up. You're moving your muscle tissue. And so the fire in the muscle tissue gets a little, not turned on like exercise will, but a little bit. And for many people who are quite overweight and not getting enough physical exercise, it can be quite a workout to just give yourself a good 1 to 5 minute wake up rub down in the morning. I personally love it for just circulating lymph and waking up tissue, and it sets my awareness into what should happen next. Now, another tip for any constitution that wants to lose weight, but particularly for the Vata and Kapha types, is to sip hot water throughout the day. And yes, you can do this in any season. Obviously, in fall, in winter, in spring, it's easier to do because it's colder out. So I use a big thermos. I have a 1 liter thermos. I use those big Stanley thermoses, those industrial ones where you can pour a little bit into the top of the thermos. And there's plenty to last me if I'm going out or if I'm going into my office, so I don't have to keep popping back to the teapot. And you just pour a little bit, you sip it every 20 minutes. And what you're doing is you're waking up these agnis. You're saying to all the fires of your body, like, okay, it's time to let go of what you no longer want. And it actually starts to pacify it starts to pacify fake hunger cravings. So the Vata person will pop things in their mouth to feel emotionally soothed, right? Their emotional eating is coming from anxiety, whereas Pittas might be coming from frustration and Kaphas might be coming from sadness. But for a Vata, they're just like, it just help relax the nervous system. Chewing gum can be great too. So sipping the hot water will help it'll actually help separate the false hunger cravings from the true hunger cravings. There's a study Dr. John Douillard on LifeSpa talks a lot about from the University of San Diego that 4 out of 5 hunger cravings are false alarms. They're actually your body's signaling for thirst, but you don't actually feel it as thirst. Now in Ayurveda, they would say the reason you don't recognize that as thirst is because there's ama. There's confusion. Ama is undigested food that's stored as toxin, and its nature is to confuse. It blocks the flow of consciousness. Consciousness carries intelligence, and so when that gets blocked, the cells get a little confused. The body gets a little confused. It sends a signal and the mind can't read it. The body it's disconnected, right? So as you get more in sync with yourself, as the weight starts to come off, you stop confusing hunger with thirst, which I find so cool and so fascinating. So sip the hot water every 20 minutes, do the dry brushing, self-massage. And then the chewing gum thing is huge for Vata. So just like when you watch a nursing baby, how their jaw is so strong and it's moving back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it does this, whether it's actually nursing or sleeping. If you watch a sleeping newborn, its jaw will still be pumping. It's like, what is going on there? Well, the pumping jaw is very similar in the human as it is to a cow. If you watch a cow chew its cud, you see the cow's actually like kind of in this lulling, mesmerized pattern. And there's a relaxation of the nervous system in humans as well. That actually occurs when the jaw is chewing. So this is awesome for Vata but the idea is like, what do you want to swallow and what do you not want to swallow? So if you're going to have trouble digesting the food that you're putting in, if you're overeating, if you're eating to, basically relax your anxiety response, you want to look for some other ways to relax that anxiety response. And some things like taking a walk, meditating, doing deep, slow breathing. Those are absolutely, totally amazing. Also, just simply chewing. So I use Peelu chewing gum, Peelu. I'll put the link in the notes here. Super simple, and it really works. It helps the Vata start to meal space. Any constitution we want a meal space with Vatas, we want to get them on, about 3 meals a day with no snacking in between meals. And for a lot of Vatas who are using food as a way to suppress anxiety, or relax anxiety, can feel either way. This is a big shift, right? So just getting them to sip that hot water. It's going to be a tough week, making that adjustment. It can be a tough week. If you're at a yoga retreat or you're nourishing your senses, it's not that hard to do. It can happen really quickly, and then just maintain it when you get home. Chewing the gum can help just create a differentiation between I'm chewing, but I'm not swallowing. I'm not gonna put anything else into my belly. I'm not a huge advocate of chewing gum, but it is a really great transitional tool. It might drive the other people in your life crazy, but it'll help get you on meal spacing. All right, so those are some of my tips for Vata. Just in closing, the etheric, the ones that have more ether going on, the idea is like get in your body, like just walking same time every day, eating same time every day, sleeping same time every day, right? Eliminating same time every day. This is just so big. And stoking this digestive fire. And you can do that with very simple mixes of spices using cumin, coriander, and fennel. You can take a half cup of each of those seeds, dry roast them in a skillet, grind them up in a coffee grinder, store them in a glass jar on your counter, and then take a half teaspoon to a teaspoon in a cup of hot water and have that before meals. And that just helps stoke the fire. Taking that 20 minutes before meals or right when you walk into the kitchen to eat, or when you sit down at the restaurant to order your food, ask for a cup of hot water, mix the spices in, and you're going to be much more able to digest the food right then and there when it arrives at your table or when you're done preparing it at home. Your food, it's much easier to digest one-pot meals. So what that means is food that's combined before it hits your belly. Soups are great because they're warm, they're moist, and that's going to make it much easier for your body to assimilate the nutrients. Foods that are dry or crunchy or complex, even like looking at like a typical American meal of like a hamburger and a side salad, that would be very hard for a Vata to digest compared to what happens when you like combine all that into a pot, like what is that called? Like a mulliganey stew. That becomes much more easier to digest. The food's combined outside of your body. It's taken in a much more liquidy form, which makes it so that your dryness can actually be hydrated. So for Vatas that are more air, where your mind is all over the place, and that's what's really creating a lot of the disconnect between your mind and your body and your mind and your digestive fire, is like you want to start to get that under wraps. And again, all the regularity that I mentioned for the etheric type Vatas, you're going to want to do that as well. One of the big things, especially for the airy vatas, is because the air is going up. It's going from your colon into your head. You're going to want to dial in your elimination, especially in the morning. So drinking even up to a quart of hot water early in the morning to start to get your digestion to start to get your elimination turned on, start to allow that down and outward flow. I call it Ayurvedic potty training. It can be hard to do this at first, but it's oh so worth getting your system in a cycle. You'll notice that when you have a good poop in the morning, you're like, and you'll feel the tension in your mind relax. You'll feel more connection to your true hunger. It'll be easier to be on your 3 meal a day pattern. All right, so those are some of my tips for what to do if you're overweight and Vata, and just a few things about like how to tell. Again, if the person you're working with is an overweight Vata or Pitta or Kapha, is really look for a lack of integration of the weight on the frame. So Vatas that are overweight, the weight will just like hang off their frame, right? They're not very muscular. Naturally, they don't have really strong Mamsa Dhatu Agni or muscle tissue fire. So the weight just kind of hangs, and look for like lumpy weight or weight that's like lumpy here and there. And you'll start to see like, okay, Vata must be involved. Now, a lot of Kapha overweight people have an underlying Vata imbalance. A lot of overweight Pitta people have an underlying Vata imbalance. And this is where it gets kind of confusing. I'll talk more into that in the next video. That's more on how to know if you're more of an overweight Pitta and what to do about it.